So thank you all for joining. This is the last session of our community networks training. We're really excited to have you all here, and we are really excited to have an awesome training lined up for you all. A few things I want to mention as housekeeping before we begin. First is please make sure that your Zoom is updated, especially if you plan on joining the ICS for the rest of the week. We're going to do breakout rooms today and also at the rest of the ICS. So please make sure your Zoom is updated and you're able to enjoy that with hopefully little to no technical difficulties. Another thing is to please keep yourself muted if you're not speaking. We record all of these sessions and we'd like to minimize any interruptions so that people who watch them back later can watch them with ease. And if you have a question, please bring it up in the chat or put up a hand on Zoom. I think you can do that if you go down to the participants button, and then you can normally find a little hand raise thing, or I think it's reactions or something. You can just ping us somehow and we will get to your question. And then let's see, if you haven't watched all of the sessions live, if you haven't been able to attend live, please, if you watch a session back, please just email me or Sarah, Sarah, who is young@isoc.org, and just let us know. And we'll make sure that we mark you for attendance for giving out certificates virtually for this, so we can give you your certificate. I believe that is all that we have for housekeeping for right now. I'm going to drop the link to our webinars and with the password in the chat. And then if you are not registered for the ICS, I'm going to drop that link in the chat also because it's happening for the rest of this week. And then, one more thing is acronym bingo or term bingo. If there's a term that you don't know, please just say so in the chat and we'll address it, because we want to make sure that everyone can learn from this training and that this information is accessible to everyone. So I believe that is it. And we have really great group lined up for you all, and I'm going to turn it over to them to introduce themselves and get the show on the road.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to this crimping workshop. I'm Esther Jang. I'm a PhD student in computer science at the University of Washington in Seattle. And I have three lovely co-hosts. If you would introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Jillian. I'm a volunteer at the NYC Mesh, and I am also an MBA student at NYU.
I'm Matt Johnson. I'm a graduate student at the University of Washington in Seattle. Work with Esther on many things dealing with community networks.
Is Grant here?
Yeah, I just made it in. Hey, my name's Grant. I'm an engineer and firmware engineer, network engineer, and I have worked on a project called People's Open Network with in Oakland, California, and I also currently work on a project called Disaster Radio, which is a cool long-range, low-bandwidth network. So, yeah.
Cool. So I posted a link to the slides we'll be using in the chat, but also, I guess, Matt, could you share the slides on your screen?
Yep, will do.
And yeah, welcome to the workshop. We'll be doing Ethernet cable crimping. And first, we'd like to start out with a quick poll of how much experience you have in crimping Ethernet cable, so that we can sort people into breakout rooms. So if everyone could just message me privately on the chat, the number corresponding to your experience level, and I can take care of that. Okay, so while people are doing that, Matt, could you go to the The next slide. I just wanted to give a quick overview of, what is crimping? Why are we here? Why are we doing it? And the point is to build an Ethernet cable. So, many of us have seen Ethernet cables before. They usually come packaged with, networking or computer equipment that we buy. So why do we have to build them ourselves? Well, these are really important in networking applications where you have to do a custom installation of something. So, for example, if you're trying to wire a router from your living room to your roof, that will be some custom length. And on the slide here on the bottom right corner, you can see this is actually a small cellular network that is deployed on the roof of this building right here. So that one required an Ethernet cable run of about 300 feet, and there's no way I had that just in my back pocket. So these Ethernet cable lengths come in these big spools, and as you can see in the upper right, and the spools don't have connectors on the end, so we have to essentially add these connectors, and that's the process of crimping. Next slide. So what we'll be doing is you all should have received a kit containing some basic equipment, including this crimp tool. So the crimp tool will help us attach these little plastic connectors onto the ends of the cable. But first we'll have to wire them up correctly. So inside of this cable is bundled these little tiny wires. We'll have to separate them out, put them in the right order, slot them into the little plastic head, and then use the tool to essentially push little copper pins into the wires to make an electrical connection, as seen in the picture. So that's what crimping is. Next slide. Yeah, and this is just a picture of your kit right here that you should have received. Some uncrimped Ethernet cable. There's the cable tester in the middle, and then the little yellow thingamabobber is a wire strip tool. There are many different types of wire strip tools, and I actually don't really like using these, but that's what we've got. So, sometimes you might find yourself in a situation where you don't have the proper tools with you. So I have done like the entire crimp process with just a pair of scissors and the crimp tool itself. So, things like that are possible. You just have to work with what you've got. And so you've got these cable boots that protect the end of the connector head here, which you want to put on first, but we'll go over that later. And we've got also some metal, like metal bodied connectors here. They're called RJ45s. These connectors are all called RJ45 connectors. And the metal ones here are, they're for outdoor rated applications. So they'll have, since they're metal, they can be grounded. But we only have a few of them, so we can practice on the plastic ones, which are for indoor applications. I think, Matt, you're the next slide.
All right. So I wanted to do a brief aside about actually connecting cables to equipment, particularly if you're using more heavy duty outdoor rated or commercial equipment. So routers and switches usually come with familiar RJ45 copper Ethernet jacks. So that's the jack that we're going to be making cables for. But if you look at this picture on the other side, you have these other weird ports. And these are called SFP ports. And so what's interesting about SFP is it's actually a flexible port. So SFP allows for either fiber connections or copper connections, and you get to kind of pick which actual jack goes in this port. So don't worry if you have equipment that has these SFP ports on it. You just need to get an adapter, and then you can use the Ethernet cables that we're going to make with this equipment.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to talk briefly about the order of the wires. I think on an earlier slide, you might have seen Esther had the pinout, and you'll come across these two types generally. One's called type A and one is called type B. Type B is the most common, definitely in the US and Canada. I'm not sure in the rest of the world, but generally people stick with this order of wires. So when you strip the cable, you'll see these different color wires and you have to put them in this order: white, orange, orange, white, green, blue. And so you can use this as a sort of reference for how you want your cable, how you need to order the wires before you slot them into the RJ45. And the only thing you might see about a type A, type B is in the context of a crossover cable might be something you hear. It's when ends a type A and one's a type B, and it's not used so much anymore because most modern switches and computers don't need it. But you might come across that term. So generally stick to type B unless you know that the other end is a type A. So base needs to be the same at both ends. And then also, yeah, you can go to the next slide. Esther mentioned the RJ45s that have the shielded jacket on the outside, the metal jacket. So those are meant to be used with shielded wire, shielded twisted pair. So there's two types generally: shielded twisted pair and unshielded twisted pair. You crimp them the same way, except that they have this shielding. You can see close up in the one picture. The shielded generally have a ground wire that needs to be touched somehow, contacting the metal jacket of the RJ45, the metal shield. So to allow the equipment to be grounded. So if you have an antenna on a roof, you want to make sure that's grounded so it doesn't get any kind of EMI, electromagnetic interference from other equipment that might be up there, or anything. It just protects the cable from interference. So go to the next slide. And then this is just kind of this is a lot. It's good for reference, but there's lots of different categories of cables. So you might come across Cat 5, Cat 6 most commonly. This just gives kind of their max bandwidth and distance. So it's just a little reference if anyone wants to go back to it later.
And this is a summary of what we'll be going in more depth about, of how to actually crimp a cable. It's a few easy steps, and then to the next slide, which will show it's actually about 5, maybe 7, depending on if we go to the next slide to test. And then now we'll go a bit more in depth. So on the next slide, the first step, you'll put your boots on first, which are those little rubber ends. This is before you're going to actually take out the wires to crimp, and this will go on the end of each of the connectors to prevent any dirt or debris from coming in. And then the next slide for step 1 is stripping the cable, which, as Esther said, I as well don't usually use the stripper given in the toolkit. You can use scissors, or you can also, there is a stripper on the end of your crimping tool as well that I usually use, and just to be very delicate when you spin it around the outer layer of the wire, and you want to have that blue metallic layer inside, as well as the string, to know that you haven't penetrated into the actual wire, and to make sure that there's no actual micro tears or anything inside all the cables when you are before you crimp. And then next slide. So step 2 will be laying out the wires in order. And as Grant mentioned, that there is like a specific order that you need to wire in. I've been unsuccessful in coming up with any song or mnemonic device to do so, but usually these are really helpful. I usually actually have a little slide of these pictures of the order in my toolkit when I go into installs. And you unravel each of them. And one big thing is to make sure that it's really straight. All the that all the wires are straight. I usually use a pair of pliers and my thumb to straighten it out. Also like a pair of scissors, just any hard edge to get it very straight. And there is going to be some wrangling of the smaller wires to get in that order. I think particularly the blues and greens, you will have to like wrangle it around. So it's kind of finding that fine line of being like gentle yet intentional in getting it into that order. And then when you have it, you cut it to about 1/2 inch. You can measure it against the RJ45, the ends of the wires, to get, because you want it to fit to the very end, and then cut it so it's evenly across, it's straight across. Next slide. And then, as I said, the RJ45 will be here. So you want all the wires, you just put it in, and each of the wires will fall into a little slot in the RJ45. If you take a deeper look, you can see at the actual piece, you can see that kind of the structure of the tool. And then you'll push it to the very end and see in this middle photo here with the circle that each, there'll be 8 copper little, the copper ends will be at the very end of the RJ45. So you want to see just a row of little copper dots, basically, or copper tips. And sometimes this will take a few trial and errors of making sure they have the right length. Sometimes people cut off a little too much the first time, so you might need to recrimp again, or sometimes this takes a few, just a bit of practice to learn how to do. And then there will be a copper wire that you will need to slide through the top end of the RJ45. There's a tiny little hook, I guess, which will ground it, especially if you're doing rooftop antennas. Yeah, it can take many trials. Okay, and then the next slide. And then you'll crimp. This is probably the most fun part of the process, in my opinion. You're gonna slide it through this top center for the size that we're using, which is 8P on your crimper, in the middle, and you'll just slide the RJ45 through and press down relatively hard. You're usually gonna hear like a little bit of a click, or you're gonna feel it a bit. And then you just slide it out and push up the boot that you put in the first step. And next slide. And then finally, the last step to know that you've made a successful wire is to use the testers that were provided in your kit. And you'll hook up both ends, and you'll have to see a green light go through every single one of the numbers, and this will ensure that the wire has been made correctly, and that the information is being sent properly. If it's not, check to see if there are any tears, or check to see if you have to go back to a few of the steps to see that the RJ45 was put in correctly, that there are no micro tears when you were stripping the wire. And if you're still not seeing it, especially if it's like an indoor cable, it might be that there's some tear within the wire, so you might want to restart on one or both of the ends.
One thing I'd like to add on this slide is that the cable tester that's in your kit can be used for cables that aren't ones that you've made also. So if you're ever debugging a problem and want to check, like, is this cable actually right? It's been on this roof for 20 years and I'm not sure if it's actually working well. You can pull out your cable tester and see.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with that, because I have this rogue broken Ethernet cable that's in my tool bag. And I keep always pulling it out during installs, and it's held me back a few times. So yeah, just these definitely can be transferable. And then the next slide, can Grant speak on this, or?
I think this is Esther.
Right? Okay. She's busy doing breakout.
Yeah, that So for those of you who are in Canada, I think there was some kind of a mix up and we accidentally sent you these flat Ethernet cables, which I actually have not seen what they look like, but I ordered myself a flat Ethernet cable just to see whether the crimping was any different. And I have posted a video link at the end of the slideshow. But what I found with this particular flat cable that I had was that stripping it was much more difficult. I had to kind of play around with the razor part of the crimp tool in order to get it to strip. So I had to like press gently and sorry, what was that in the chat? Okay, yeah, so I had to sort of press gently on all sides with the razor in order to make a score around the sheath and then pull it off. Also, there were still twisted pairs inside, so I had to untwist them. And the stripes were unfortunately not marked, so I had to keep track of which white wires belong to which twisted pairs. However, these particular wires that I had were too thin actually to crimp. They like didn't go into those channels in the RJ45 connector correctly. So if you have that problem, I think, you know, it's just kind of, that's the cable's bad and it's not on you to try and crimp that. But like hopefully the cables that they sent are a little bit better. So if we could work that out during the small breakout rooms, that would be great. Next slide. So I think we need a couple more seconds to make the breakout rooms because I don't have that ability on my side. So I have to send over the list for the breakout rooms to be made. So yeah, but once you're in your breakout rooms, introduce yourselves and start crimping. Next slide. Here are some videos and hopefully you all can access the slideshow on the link on the chat. So
yeah, and we'll paste
yep.
these videos in also. It looks
yeah.
like Jillian's doing that in the chat.
Cool, sounds good.
Yeah. While we're taking care of breakout rooms, does anyone have any high-level questions, general questions? I see a question in chat about what does live stream do during breakouts? I don't actually know. That might be a Zoom question for one of the ISOC organizers.
Jolly, let's keep it on the main room. I don't think we're going to record the breakouts.
There's one question about how long has flat cable been around? I've never seen it, or I never saw it before you sent it. That's a good question. I first encountered flat cable about 5 years ago, but only in patch cable form. I've actually never personally seen a spool of flat cable. I don't know if the other organizers have thoughts on this.
Yeah, I've only seen patch cables and generally pretty short patch cables. But a lot of people like use it for like things that go, if you try to go out a window and you want to close flat, that's like the use case, I guess. But yeah, practical situations, it's not really that useful.
Question from Sally. Just wondering about the different types of cable and are they used in different climates, temperatures?
I think it's different types of cable. So you can get like UV rated cable. There's different qualities of cable, the different like categories and different like technical specifications are used mostly for their capabilities. So like if you have Cat 5 E versus Cat 6, you'd use the one because it's better than the other, or you're going to use fiber because you need to go a further distance. But in some cases, if you're in a very wet area or a very a lot of sunlight on a rooftop or something, you might want to use UV rated cable if it's a sunny roof. So there are environmental considerations when you're running cable or choosing the cable that you want to use.
Yeah. And then I think another thing is to sort of think about is that the cable has both an electrical specification and an environmental specification. So you can get like UV rated Cat5 cable, which is like big, bulky, heavy duty, like feels nice and stiff. But that because it's only category 5, you won't be able to get a gigabit connection. You'd only be able to get a 100 megabit connection. So the electrical specification and like the physical specification, how tough the cable is, are kind of independent.
Or also the bend radius. So something to think about is that there's a certain thing called bend radius with the cable that you can only bend it so far before you actually break the copper inside of it, or cause like a micro tear inside the cable. So that's something to consider, is that some cable is more bendable than others. And that's like another physical characteristic that you would maybe consider.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely use the outdoor Cat5 for running. For NYC Mesh, we use it for running antennas down from the rooftop. But then at the end, we're also making usually like smaller Ethernet cords with it for indoor use, and it can be pretty bulky because it's not very flexible or anything, just in someone's house.
We got a question in the chat. Is there a preferred coiling or wrapping technique for Cat5 or other cables? I think, yeah, personally, I think over under is probably good. It's just good practice because it prevents the cable from like kinking in a certain direction. For many of you, you might not have heard about different cable wrapping techniques. I can actually show that.
Yeah, I had a friend I worked with one time that said that cables have good memories and bad memories. You want to make sure they have all good memories. So
yeah,
they'll stay the way you bend.
Right. Yeah. If you've ever had like a coil of cable that just like will never stop looking like a slinky because it's just been in that coil so long, a way to fix this is, you take the cable and instead of coiling just in a single direction, you're going to take the cable and like coil it in the opposite direction every coil. And it takes some amount of, my technique is a little off here, but oh gosh. Yeah, you can.
This will be next year's
Hard
workshop.
under pressure. Hold on. Yeah.
One thing also is that when you take, if you buy a big old spool of cable, that cable on the spool like will have a twist to it. So as you're unspooling it, that's kind of something to keep in mind. If you like unspool it from the end, you'll have a curly Q twist in the cable versus if you like actually spin the spool as you're taking it out. So if you're doing really long cable runs, that might be something you have to deal with.
All right, apparently I can't figure this out under pressure. So maybe in the breakout rooms, I will figure it out. But basically,
it's like,
yeah.
it's like, so you have one loop like this and the under is this way and over is the other way. So like this, so it goes more, it's really hard to tell, but like it goes more normal and then you go under. And there's like a certain, when you have a big cable, you can actually feel it going over and under. It makes sense. So that's all.
Yeah, yeah,
there are many YouTube videos about this if you like Google for over under cabling.
Yeah. I guess, are the breakout rooms ready?
I just heard that they are almost ready.
Okay. More questions.
Oh, Sally has a question. What is the lifespan of Cat 5e?
That's a great question. And actually sort of relates to kind of what we were talking about earlier about the cables. So the lifespan of the cable is part of that physical specification. So like it's hard, I can't say like what the lifespan is of Cat 5e or not. It depends on the cable. If you use an indoor cable outside, so if you just go to the store and you get an Ethernet cable, you know, a couple months, maybe a year if you're lucky. But especially if it's in a sunny area, the sun will like really tear up the plastic jacket. And if the cable moves at all, you'll start seeing like pieces of plastic flaking off and stuff. At that point, it's probably not going to go so well. But yeah, it depends a lot on your environment and what the physical specification is of the cable.
In indoor situations, cable will last very long, though. I mean, outdoor definitely it's dependent on the environment, but normal indoor Cat 5 lasts a number of years, decade or two, maybe.
Yeah, I've actually heard there's a telecom in that their equipment has all like gone without failure for 10 years. And I think that's because the weather is just like perfect there, not very much humidity, like not overly much sun, like, things like that. I think we had a question about the recordings.
I can take that. I also just heard that the breakout rooms are ready. Jocelyn, I'm going to put in the chat again, the training website and the password to get into it so that you can see the recordings there. But it looks like our breakout rooms are ready.
Cool. Let's see.
Esther and crew. Okay, cool. Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, I'm going to pause recording because I am recording.
So can I quickly get a show of hands or something? Who is from Canada with a flat cable and struggled to strip their flat cable? Yeah, we had like a bunch of issues with that. So I'm just gonna give a quick demo. So this is my super cheap, like not great cable that I ordered at the last minute, which is really hard to strip, but I use the razor in here to sort of like gently press on each side. So actually all 4 sides of the flat cable I had to do for mine. So to make like kind of a cut on all sides. And like the cuts have to line up so that when you pull on it, they'll actually all come at the same place. And then just kind of like wriggle and pull to strip that cable without hopefully damaging the wires inside. Yeah, I think regular cables will be much easier because the tools are made for that. But as you can see, it is technically possible to pull that sheath off. And then what you should have, if you haven't damaged your cables too much, it is like, I mean, mine has these little, strings which are supposed to separate the pairs, but they will be twisted pairs. And like some of them will be white, so you just have to keep track of which white ones go with which colored ones. And you'll have to like look into where the pairs come out twisted so that you can do that. And then it's the same process as in the regular cable.
Yeah, I think someone asked a question about the ground cable being red or coming up, showing up red. That's going to happen if you didn't use the grounded, the shielded ones. I don't have mine here, but the shielded RJ45s. So that tests that the ground was actually successfully made. So if you have this, if you use these two, then you can actually get that ground light should show up green. I believe I haven't really used that tester that we sent, but it should test the ground. But if you just use the normal ones, then that obviously won't come up because it's not connected.
Yeah, there are kind of more detailed also, you know, there are video links and other resources. So yeah, definitely look back at the slides and keep going. I failed like at least 3 times before I got one successful crimp the first time.
This is an example of what did I do wrong? Forgot to put the boot on before I crimped it. I don't like boots anyways, so they make it hard to get it in and out, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Cool. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm just saying that I don't usually use boots, but I don't know how long my cables have lasted. So might be someone else's problem by then.
If you are purchasing jacks for installs, you can get fancy plugs that have kind of a built-in boot. So like the only reason for me, I feel like boots are necessary is if you're ever going to be dragging cables, they prevent you from like getting this little thing stuck as you're pulling it through. But yeah, you can get things that are less annoying than boots, but that also do the same thing. There are many options.
One other thing I just thought of that you might come across eventually is a lot of people may have heard of this called an easy crimp tool or an easy crimp end. And there's certain ends that are pass through. So the cables actually go all the way through the end. And then you have a special tool that cuts it off while you crimp it. So you might come across that sometime in your travels with RJ45s. And they're kind of annoying if you don't have the special tool to do it. You can do it with scissors and maybe make it work, but you just might come across that. They might call them pass-through RJ45s or easy RJ45s. In my opinion, they're more of a pain than normal ones.
Great. So seeing as it's 2:01, if there are any last minute questions, please throw them in the chat or reach out to our awesome team of trainers today. Thank you so much. This has been an amazing session. It's been really fun to play with the cables. And we really appreciate all your time and expertise on this. So thank you so much.
Yeah, our emails are in the slideshow too at the end. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
And what I'll also do is I'm recording this session. Like always, I have the chat recorded as well. I'll go through the chat and I'll pull out all of those relevant links, all of, you know, the slideshow, those YouTube videos that were linked, and we will find a nice, accessible, easy way to put them on our website. So you all can check it out later and play with your cables and your crimpers and your testers even more. So thank you so much to Esther and Matt and Jillian and Grant. We really appreciate your time and all of your insights. And I think we're going to turn it over to our policy session now.
Thank you guys. Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good luck. Have fun. Neil.
Bye.
Thank you.
If you're in both of those, you can stay. This is the same link. So it's the same room. It's going to take you back here. So you can stay here. You can take a break and insights. And I think we're going to turn it over to our policies. Uh-oh. All right, I'm going to stop recording now.